What's up? What's up to all of my spiritual and holistic family? I hope everybody is taking care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, because that is what it's all about. And I know I say that each week because it's true. Every week, every day, every hour, as sometimes brings something different and new in our lives. And we're all experiencing and being challenged with a lot of different things. So we want to be able to maintain that mind, body, spirit, holistic, connection, that connection to spirit and to our ancestors. So that's why I say it every single week. So welcome, welcome, welcome to my podcast. If this is your first time joining, and welcome back if you have been here before. I appreciate your support. This podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as Amazon Music. So whichever platform is best for you. And of course, I'm on all of the social media platforms. We are on TikTok, Instagram, about to be on YouTube. I'm just kind of organizing things and getting videos together and doing the editing and all that kind of fun stuff. So be sure to follow us. Those links will be in the description here. So today I'm super excited to be bringing a topic to you guys that is very, very near and dear to my heart. So we're talking about how to connect with your ancestors. And this is going to be part one for sure, because there's so many different layers and so many different levels to this. And I definitely want to bring in some experts and so that they can bring their perspective in the very different ways that this can be done. Okay. And so this one is particularly for people of the African diaspora. And the reason I chose that group is look at me, you know what I'm saying? I'm obviously from the diaspora. I'm Caribbean, I'm Black American. And then of course, I've been able to trace my roots back to Nigeria, Benin, and a couple of other places. But my main reasoning for that, obviously, particularly Black people in America, a lot of us are very, very disconnected from our roots due to slavery. Most of us know that. So that's usually holding a lot of us back because they don't know where to start. They don't know how to access their ancestors. There's some sort of fear there for a variety of different reasons. So we're going to break all of that down today, and we're going to get some actual applicable steps that are very easy that you can do to start to reach out to and connect with your ancestors. So of course, I'm going to tell my story because, that's spirit leading me to do that. The ancestors are leading me to do that. I made sure I did my prayer before I got started, so to bring the ancestors in as well as God, to make sure that they are speaking through me as well. So I'm not just on a renegade road and go off track somewhere, giving information that may not be beneficial to you guys. Okay. So let me go ahead and start my journey and let you guys know how it was for me and some of the things that I did to be able to get to the place that I'm at today. Okay. So as a child, and some of you may also resonate with this as well. Okay. Because I truly believe whether or not you are really connected or you're really conscious, our ancestors are always there. Our ancestors are always assisting us in this life. Our ancestors are always guiding us. They're always trying to help us for a variety of different reasons. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Okay, so for me as a child, and I spoke about this in a previous episode. Be sure to check that out. I believe it was the truth about shadow work. Me as a child, I was very rooted and connected to the spirit realm. Okay. Now, I was the only one like this in my family because the way that I was raised, we were raised in a strict religious background where there wasn't a whole lot of talk about ancestral veneration or our ancestors and them working in our lives or hoodoo or traditional African spirituality or ARTs or anything like that. So I consider myself, and definitely being on the path that I'm on, one of the first in my generation. Now, as I started to do some ancestral veneration, I realized that we had a couple of other people, who were also practicing some things, but had to do it very, very quietly because the times didn't really allow for that. Okay. So I was very rooted and connected. I had vivid dreams. I had a very close connection with my ancestors and my spirit guides because, as I explained, my brother and sister were quite a bit older than me. So I had a lot of time to myself, to be in my own world. And I would receive messages from them. They became like best friends of mine. I would talk to them when I was sad, when I needed to be uplifted. They were always there. And this was as a young child. Now, I knew nothing about what was happening, who they were. I just knew that it was very comfortable and safe for me. And I, looking back and reflecting from the time that I can remember, okay, there's memories that I have of when I was a baby, being a baby. I definitely have memories of being like 3 years old, very vivid memories still to this day. So my entire life, my ancestors have been a part of my life, but I wasn't aware of who they were. So I think definitely that really, that and the fact that what my purpose um, is why I am so in tune, so connected, so spiritual to this day. Okay, so let's fast forward that on up to, my childhood was pretty traumatic. There were some traumatic experiences there. And I don't blame anybody. I blame the fact that a lot of us in the African diaspora, we have a lot of trauma that needs to be healed, that's inside of our DNA, that has been passed down to family to family to family. So that's a lot of times why we talk about generational healing and manifesting generational wealth, and why a lot of us are the first of anything, because let's face it, we've had 400 years, 400 plus years of slavery and then systemic oppression that is still in existence and is very in existence today and is very dominant to this day. I mean, I don't think anybody could deny that unless they're delusional and in denial. Okay. But those of us who are connected to our African selves somewhat and are experiencing what it's like to be Black in America, we have trauma that needs to be healed and dysfunction all over the place in everybody's family. Okay. So fast forward that on up to my early 20s, when things in my life had kind of gotten really traumatic and really bad, where I had to kind of be pushed into, okay, girl, you're getting off track here. If you don't turn this wheel back around, you may never be able to get it back around. And I'm so grateful for that. So that kind of pushed me and catapulted me into spiritual understandings, because I was so turned off by the strict religious background that I had, and I didn't have any knowledge of anything else. I just was like kind of going solo, like, hey, I'm just going to do this thing by myself. And I had to be pushed into a traumatic experience that was like, no, you need to find out about spirituality. So that's how I got into it. Actually really started out with like learning about meditation. So I started learning about meditation. That was huge for me. Okay. That gave me major breakthrough in itself. And I wanted to know more, because I was always a seeker ever since I was a child. I was always intrigued by any kind of like magical experiences, magical things on TV, like witches and stuff like that, and casting spells and all of that stuff. I was like really, really all up into that kind of stuff as a kid. So once I got into meditation, that expanded my consciousness, even at a brief little level, to allow me to see things differently and experience life differently. So I wanted to explore more of that. I wanted to know what else is out there, because now I'm finding out that there's more than just this religion that I have been taught and that I have been kind of pushed and forced into. And I don't blame my mom. Like I said, she was doing the best she can do. Like most parents, she was doing what she thought was best at the time. Okay. But we're all individual spirits having our own journey. And essentially, at some point, we're going to branch off and go to seek our own journey on our own terms. And so that's what I was catapulted into. And I'm so beyond grateful for that, because it led me on an amazing journey. That doesn't mean that journey was all of the light, and all happy and healing and om namaste. There was still trauma that needed to be healed that I was faced with once I started to get healing tools. So I got into spirituality. I got into meditation first. I started to explore. I wanted to know everything. I mean, I got books. I got into crystals. Oh my God, I was so amazed by crystals and the power that they hold from the earth. I got into metaphysics right away. Okay. So that's the beautiful thing about having a spiritual journey. Once you start to tap into these layers of consciousness, because we all have gifts and abilities that are stored inside of our DNA that go back to our ancestral past, because literally their blood is running through our DNA. So we have access to sacred wisdom and sacred information that you wouldn't be able to access on an earthly, physical 3D reality. So immediately, from meditation to crystals, I jumped into metaphysics, which would be considered a pretty complex topic, especially for a newbie, but my spirit was led there. And there's no doubt in my mind that my ancestors were guiding me along the way the whole time, like, hey, get into this, go to this class, try this, and I was being led, as well as my own intuition as I began to strengthen that and grow that as well. I jumped into tarot cards right away. you know, some of these things I picked up and I put down and I picked back up as well along the way on the journey. So I got into all of these different spiritual subjects, and I started to get into the metaphysics of things. I started to get into law of attraction. So now we're talking manifestation. A lot of these things you'll hear me say are the same thing, just a different name. Once you start to study things a little further and you go on your journey, you'll realize, hey, a lot of the stuff is the same stuff. A lot of the things and the principles actually correlate with a lot of things that are inside of the Bible, that are inside of the Quran, and so forth and so forth. So it's an amazing journey, right? So I got into the spiritual part first. I got into metaphysics like right away. And then from there, I jumped into healing. Because before I could even start to think about, now mind you, my ancestors are still working with me, guiding me. God is always in the picture. God has never left the picture. Even when I decided to kind of detach myself from God and say, I'm going to go ahead and do this on my own, God was always just laying there wait, like, hey, you know, whenever you're ready, I'm here, decide, you know, that's how it's going to be. But as long as you're on this path of discovery and seeking, I'm gonna leave you alone. I'm gonna let you catch your lessons like you need to catch your lessons. So that's exactly what I did. So I went from metaphysics into the healing side of things because that's what I needed. Mind you, I had come from a childhood of trauma that consisted of all kinds of horrible things. We'll talk about that a little later on. So there was a lot of shit that needed to be healed. Okay. Like that's what I say a lot of times. Before we can even think about healing generational curses and traumas in our ancestry, there's a lot of stuff that we have to heal with inside of ourselves because we've been a product of that. So once you become conscious to a certain extent or even a small amount, you realize that there's things inside of you that need to be healed, especially as you get older, because what begins to happen? We begin to then start to act out those same behaviors onto the next generation. That's our children, that's our children's children, and so forth and so forth, unless you begin to break the cycle somewhere. So breaking the cycle for me and for most people that I know starts with yourself. It starts with you being able to start to heal things within yourself. And I'm going to say this because this is extremely important. If you have had a traumatic, extremely dysfunctional upbringing and you know, childhood or even early adulthood, teenager, whatever, it is okay and actually recommended to seek out some sort of psychotherapy as well, okay? Because some stuff is going to be bigger than you, especially if you're in the middle of it, okay? So if you're in the middle of depression, it's kind of hard to heal yourself from depression, okay? You're going to need to gain some strength. You're going to need to get stronger before you can get to a place of being able to heal yourself completely by yourself. So please don't be a stranger to psychotherapy and having someone who is educated in that area. I will say for people of the African diaspora, try to find therapists that look like you, that can relate to you. And the reason why is because then we're able to share freely a lot of the things that go on in our culture. It's sad to say it, but it is the fact, and we know this, that Black people in America experience a different culture in America than white people or any other race for that matter. Okay, and that really kind of goes for around the world, but we're particularly talking about Black people in the African diaspora in America, okay, because that's where most of my experience is. Even though I'm half Caribbean, I have very limited experience of that culture. It was a lot, I was a lot younger when I lived in the islands, okay? So I was raised over here in the States, in Detroit and Tennessee and Florida, and now in Atlanta and Georgia. So I understand this culture a lot, you know, because this is the way that I was raised. This is the way that I grew up. This is the way that I dealt with my adult life. So I understand this culture and the things that we experience over here and that we still continue to experience over here. Okay. So, don't shy away from psychotherapy. And I would definitely suggest getting a psychotherapist or a therapist who looks like you, who you feel able to share certain things with freely, okay? So that you can get that healing on that deeper level. Because a lot of times what happens is we may go off and ask certain people about, you know, how do we do this and how do we do that? And they themselves may not be healed in that direction. Whereas a therapist is going to be able to help you based on actual principles, and you know, they're not so closely connected with that. They know the right things to say and when to say it, okay? So that being said, I had to go on my intense healing journey, and still am in the process of it. Like I said, 2022 is showing me like, girl, we still got shit up in there. And that's okay. That's okay, because the awareness of it just lets me know that, okay, we're on our way to something even bigger and greater and better. I'm stepping more in alignment with purpose, no matter how painful it may be. Okay. So I went into my healing journey. There was definitely different layers of that. I studied all kinds of different stuff. I experienced all different types of spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga, many different styles of yoga, different styles of meditation, law of attraction, spiritual alchemy, tantra. I did all of these different things. Reiki, we talked about that. And then once I got into Reiki is when I really found out that, hey, I've got a natural gift and ability of energy healing, and it's strong and it's powerful. So those types of things let me know that, hey, this is something that you have inside of you. This is something that you used to do. This is something. It was like riding a bike for me, like like boom, like, yeah, we know this, tapping into tantra and raising my kundalini and tapping into goddess energy. Those types of things allow me to reawaken aspects that were already within inside of my DNA from past lifetimes, and when we say past lifetimes, we're talking about that ancestral DNA that's running in our veins as well. Past lifetimes, you know what I'm saying? And this can go on up to metaphysics, depending on how you start your journey. So yeah, so I got into traditional, I always say traditional African spirituality. It just works better for me. For some reason, I just always say that and always have, versus ART, which is African religious tradition, something like that, art, whatever. So I always just say traditional African spirituality because, I still have a little piece of me, I must admit, that kind of shies away when you say religion, based on my experience. So that's something I'm working on. I definitely respect the different religions. I respect other people's choice and their path and how they do that. But for me personally, the word religion for me kind of rubs me the wrong way. So I always say stick with spirituality because, in my opinion, that allows you to branch out and kind of have your own discovery and your own experience. And I'm so grateful for that because if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be. Okay. So let's fast forward or rewind and fast forward to now. We've done a tremendous amount of healing. My husband passed away or transitioned 12 years ago. That was another bout of healing. And I had to go into single motherhood. Now my girls are getting older, things like that. And all along, I will say this with my daughters, from the time they were like 3 and 5, I want to say, is when I started getting into this stuff. They were right there beside me. They were right there beside me the whole time with every different thing that I was trying. And my reason for that is because of my experience that I had with such a strict religious background and upbringing where we didn't have choices. It was like, this is it, and this is what you're going to do. And if you start asking crazy questions, we're going to shut you down. So you can't even express yourself in that way. I wanted my daughters to have choices. Okay. I wanted their spiritual path to be their own spiritual path. All right. I was crisscross applesauce, guys. Now it's time to stretch it out. There we go. There's one. To have Okay, guys, so we won't be doing too many more leg changes because that just damn near screwed up the whole recording. But anyway, so with my daughters, I wanted them to be able to have choices. I wanted them to have experiences. I wanted them to participate in a lot of different things. So they actually got to be like right beside me. And that in itself is actually the beginning of breaking generational curses to allow them to explore, to have the option. And then now as early young adults, they of course are like off doing their own thing. But just like me, they'll come back around. And when they do, they'll have all of these tools, as well as they know their mom. They can call up and ask, hey, questions about different things. And I have a plethora of knowledge and I'm always in their ear about different stuff. And they have options. So if they choose to go the church route, they can do that as well. I'm going to love them. I'm going to respect them one way or another, but they're definitely going to be able to have some sort of conscious idea about spirituality and why it is they're doing what they're doing. And that's what I wanted for them. Okay, so let's fast forward on up and to really getting to know my ancestors, okay? Because throughout this whole time, my ancestors were there, but they were kind of like in the background because that's where I had them. I could hear them, and within my intuition, I would talk to them. I have a relationship with them. They joke, we joke together. You know what I'm saying? They're very outspoken and things like that. But I still never connected the fact that this was my ancestors. And the reason why is because I jumped into a lot of spirituality from a lot of other different cultures that were similar to what you do in African spirituality, but none of them really connect on the, connecting with your ancestors to really start to grow into the next phase. Okay. So about 2014, I kept feeling this strong pull. I felt like I had learned so much. You know what I'm saying? I knew a lot of information at a young age. So I've been on this path and this journey consciously, basically my entire adult life. Okay. I think I got started at 23. So the whole thing, and I've been on it. So my whole entire adult life, I've been on this path. So I started feeling about 2014, like, I feel myself being called to my African roots. And people thought I was crazy, the people I was around, because they weren't on that. And I was like, yeah, I could just feel like, something's calling me back to my African roots. But definitely that's exactly what was happening. And I ended up getting to a festival. It was an Ifa festival, just random. Okay. Like it was on Facebook. I didn't even know these people. And it was like a traveling event. And it was like a 2-3 day event. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going. I got the tickets, grabbed my girls up. We got our tent and our food and stuff, and we went. I had no idea what to expect. I had nothing. I just was being pushed to this event, and I'm so grateful that I did, because from there, that's when I started learning about our ancestors, and I started learning about, the African connection. I started learning a plethora of information, and it just was like, it just really opened up another portal that had been missing. So for me and my journey, I felt like all of that needed to happen because I needed to get the spirituality down. I needed to work on the healing. I needed to tap into some of my gifts. I needed to understand the metaphysics of it. Then I got into the traditional African spirituality and started to find out about my ancestors, who these spirits were that have been helping me all along. Okay. Because before, in like the new age version of stuff, it's like your spirit guides, the angels and stuff like that, which is cool too. Don't get me wrong, but my spirit started needing more. My spirit was like, I need definite answers. This isn't going to work for me anymore. So sure enough, I started to go and explore that, and that led me into another world of spirituality. And all of this was being guided through my ancestors as well as my higher power. So I was like, wow, once I started to open up that door, I was like, my gosh, there's a huge aspect of spirituality that I wasn't getting from all of these other cultures, which a lot of this stuff originated over here from Africa. So I was just like, and from there, I started to find out about myself. Okay. So I started to find out about Sankofa, basically going back to where I came from to understand where I'm going. Because as people of the diaspora, particularly in America, because other cultures, other Black people and other cultures, they had some sort of connection to their roots still. Whereas us in America, we were completely ripped away from all of our culture, for the longest. I mean, we just got Juneteenth back on the map, you know what I'm saying? So for the longest, we were completely ripped away from any of our spirituality, any of our cultures, any of our foods, all different types of culture or anything that identified as us and from our African self was removed from us. So when you are a spirit that is trying to exist, what you start to do is you start to assimilate. You start to be like a chameleon. You start to go around being and acting like different things just to fit in. And that makes it a very uncomfortable experience for your spirit, because now you're doing things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, that doesn't have nothing to do with your DNA or your lineage or your bloodline. So, and that's just the American way for Black people. We're constantly trying to assimilate and trying to become something to be accepted, and really it's never enough. Okay, so I started to tap into knowledge of self and understand who I was as an African woman, who I am as an African woman. My life began to change dramatically. I got my locks in 2015, and everybody told me once I started my locks, they were like, oh yeah, your life is, you're going to go on a journey. I was like, child, please, I'm just tired of doing my hair. That's where I was. I had, ruined my hair so much, and so that was a journey in itself. I had to get comfortable with loving myself as I am. I'm a dark-skinned sister. I had to get into comfortable with understanding the importance and the power of my melanin, loving that, my big lips, my big nose, my very African features, my 4C hair, that in itself was some unwinding to do. And, I had my ancestors guiding me the whole time and pushing me where I needed to be. Now I love absolutely all of that about myself. You know what I'm saying? I'm not putting anything else on. If you knew me before then, I was 18 inches pack of yak down to my butt. You know what I'm saying? I was straight hair, nails done all the time, all that different stuff. And I'm not knocking anybody who does that, to each his own. It's just for me, I was outside of character and I didn't even realize it because I was trying to assimilate to be like something that wasn't in alignment with who I am and who my spirit is, but I needed all of it. I needed the entire journey to get here, to be where I am today. So go ahead and fast forward back to that traditional African spirituality. And I started learning about myself. I started learning where I come from, where my people come from, the magnificence of us. And once I started to get to the next phase, which is interacting directly with my ancestors. So that's what this podcast is really about. That's what this episode is really what we're talking about. How do we get in touch and in tune and connect with our specific bloodline ancestors, okay? Because I hear a lot of stuff and I see a lot of things, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times people want to jump to Kemet. They want to be like, oh, we're Kemetic, we the Anunnaki and all of that stuff. And the bottom line is not everybody came from Kemet, okay? I'm going to go ahead and break it down just like that. Not everybody came from Kemet, okay? And you're doing your bloodline ancestors a disservice when you skip over them to go back 600,000 years to try to grab an ancestor that may not even be a part of your bloodline. You don't elevate your ancestry like that. You don't elevate your ancestry going forward like that. So that's why it's so crucial to tap into at some point your own bloodline ancestors, okay? Because we are here having a spiritual experience in human form, okay? Our ancestors were here having a human experience and they suffered a lot in order for us to be where we are today. They went through the struggle and we got it a lot easier than they ever had in any generation before within the slavery generation for the last 400 years. They had it hard. They had very little to work with. And they made it work, and they made magic and miracles happen in a variety of different ways, okay? They were always rooted and connected to God, okay? The Christianity thing came on the scene during slavery, this version of Christianity, okay? The Roman Catholicism version of Christianity, okay? That's not what we were doing before. Nobody had ever heard of that around the world. No indigenous person had heard of that, not even the Native Americans. Some of us were Native Americans over here in America, okay? So there's a lot of amazing ancestors that we have. You got the Dogon tribe, you've got Nigeria, you've got Benin, you've got the Congo, you've got all kinds of amazing ancestors because Africa was one. So we were all over the place when we had been here for millions of years. So we were all over the place, okay? So if you want to tap into your actual ancestry, this is what I did, okay? As I got pushed into it, I wanted to know more. I'm a seeker. I just kept on wanting to know more, and I still want to know more. I never get tired. You can never learn too much when it comes to this stuff, So I started to, in 2016, ask my family about my ancestors. I started in the immediate lineage, okay? Like, who was my grandfather's mother? What was her name? I started asking about different people, what they were like, where they worked at, what types of things that they did. And I started to create a family tree. Now in 2016, when I started this, it was extremely frustrating. And I'm going to say, go ahead and be patient. Be patient with your family because you got to realize this is like busting a paradigm up and opening a gate of consciousness that they may not have opened up, may not be ready for. It may not be for them to. So I had a lot of people who did not care. Like, bottom line, they straight up did not care because, like I said and explained, I'm one of the first in this bloodline in a long time. Now, mind you, I'm one of the first. My great grandmother was definitely somebody as well, but back in the 20s, she didn't have no she didn't have no internet, baby. She didn't have access to books. There wasn't people writing certain things like this where she could get direct, contact in. She was working with the roots. She was working with what was taught to her, and she had to be secretive about that. So my great grandmother was a very spiritual woman, like a lot of people in my family, I found out, okay? A spiritual woman, but never went to church. She would always read her Bible, knew her Bible very well, but never went to church. And my grandmother on my mom's side, same way. She rarely went to church. I think I seen her go to church like 1 or 2 times, and that was it my entire life. But baby, she know her Bible, okay? So now my mother, on the other hand, my mother is very spiritual, but she's very knows her Bible, and she's also very religious, okay? My dad is very spiritual, and he's also very religious. And then you come back around, and here I am coming down on the scene, and I'm very spiritual, but not religious, okay? So there's something to do with that spirituality that runs through my veins and my DNA that possibly will run through my girl's DNA as well, depending on who our lineage is, okay? So I started asking my grandmother, I started asking my mother, they did not care. People did not care, honey. I was like in tears, literally crying, like, this is a damn shame that nobody cares about where we came from. I was hurt. It was almost as if I could feel the pain of my ancestors who hadn't been venerated by their family, who hadn't been brought up and lifted up energetically in so long. Now let's go ahead and fast forward that. I never gave up. I kept on asking. And throughout the years, as I was asking, more and more people would come up. I get their names. I started a free family tree on familytree.now.com. And I started adding people. I started plugging people in. I started putting up dates. I started finding people. Okay. I was able to find that when my great grandfather's father was a free Black man. I started to find out that people were from New Orleans. Okay. So a lot of roots over there from the Louisiana area. I started finding out we got a lot of family from the California area, the close to the Mexico line, a lot of the Aztec, I used to have dreams about this. So a lot of the dots started to become connected. And the more I started asking my family about these family members, the more they started remembering people. Okay. So I started out in 2016 with, I think, a small little handful, hardly nobody on my mama's side. My daddy was actually able to give me more information about his side. My side was looking real pitiful because it was the American side. Okay, my dad's side, I was able to trace back to Nigeria. Boom, my grandfather, he was brought over as a slave, and he was a lot older than my grandmother. So that's what made that easy to track down. So boom, now I have my connection to straight to the motherland. You know what I'm saying? So don't give up and don't be upset with your family. You may have to be the one who taps something inside of them that ignites something in their spirit that helps them to remember, okay? And in this process, while you guys are doing this, you guys are elevating your ancestors, okay? At that point, they're like, wait a minute, somebody calling us, somebody talk about us? What? We ain't heard nobody talk about us in like 200 years, so that's a real exciting thing. Now, fast forward to this year in 2022, my grandmother, I was talking to her a couple of years ago, and she said, oh, you know what? We had a genealogist in the family that actually traced a whole family tree of your great granddaddy that went all the way back to royalty. Okay, Asheo, I was so excited, right? And she was like, I don't know her number, you know? So I was like devastated, but I take fast forward up to the January of this year. For some reason, this aunt, this cousin, I guess she would be like a third cousin of mine, she transitioned a couple years back. She had that list, and her son reached out to my grandmother and was like, hey, she had this list. I don't know what to do with it. Do you want it? And she was like, yeah. And she got the list, honey. And guess who has it now? On that list had 75 ancestors' names, where they lived. It explained my connection to the roots when it comes to Louisiana, when it comes to California, why I feel a certain way when I step my foot on that soil, why I tapped into some of the other things that I'm into now, as far as the hoodoo and as far as the Ifa, as well as some of the voodoo and things like that. It's all interconnected. And this all started on me just randomly going to this Facebook thing, this EFI event on Facebook in 2014. me being diligent and asking about my ancestors from family members and finding out that, hey, in the beginning they didn't know, and I never gave up and I kept in on them. And I always was the one to be like, hey, what about your grandmother? What about your mom? What was her name? And finding out and helping them to remember more and more people. Okay. So I started to tap into my direct line of ancestors. And the one that I never forgot from the time I was 11 years old was my great grandmother, because we always had this connection without even saying words. We both were very energetic like that. I described the child I was. She was a very peaceful woman, very sophisticated, very classy woman. And she used to babysit me when my mom and dad went to work briefly. And I just loved our experience because it was just quiet. We didn't need to say words. It was like we had an energetic communication with one another, and that was enough for us. And I was very connected to her on up into her older age once she became bedridden and things like that. And I would sit with her. And so when she transitioned, it really hit me hard. And I never forgot about her. And I always stayed rooted to that particular ancestor. That's all I had before I knew anything about no ancestry. And I always would call on her, and I would always venerate her. And that's who I had until we were able to start to tap into some more. And I went further on my journey. So as you can imagine, my great grandmother's at the top of that list when I'm calling my ancestors. And she's beyond proud of me. And I'm so grateful for them all, because throughout the whole journey, they were guiding me. They were guiding me where I needed to be. They were guiding me back into creating my relationship with God, which was powerful. So having God and having my ancestors, man, I mean, that's just unbelievable. It gives me so much sense of self and understanding, and helps me to have greater understanding of what I'm doing here, what my purpose is, what my role is in this family, and things like that. So let's talk about applicable ways that you can connect with your ancestors. So I just gave you one, which is probably the most simple. Start asking your family. Okay. Start asking your family about your ancestors, asking what their names were. Start writing these things down, what their names were, what they did, where they lived, and start to look up information online. Okay. If you can get into some obituaries, things like that, some birth and death records, start to tap into some of those things. And then you will be able to have some sort of sense of who you're calling. Okay. Now, I will say this, there are some of our ancestors that were on this planet and on this earth who weren't exactly the best people when they were here. Okay. These are not exactly the ones that you want to be working with. Okay. I have a particular ancestor who's close. And actually, the ancestors that I work with are the higher ascended ones when I'm doing certain work. Okay. But when I'm giving offerings and things like that, I'll give them, I have a list in the scroll that of them all pretty much. But there's certain ones I never call on because I know that they weren't good people when they were here. So you want to be aware of that as well. That's why you want to ask who these people were, what type of people they were, because you don't want to be calling up just any and everybody, literally. So that being said, that's one way that you can reach out and connect with your ancestors, okay? The other way is by creating an altar, because some people will not have access to that, okay? Some people won't have any access whatsoever, um, to be able to get the information from their family. So you may have to start with nothing, like a lot of us did, okay? But trust and know that once you start to tap into connecting with your ancestors, they're going to assist you. They're going to help you. They're going to be so proud of you. They're going to try to do anything they can to reach you, to give you what it is that you need, okay? Whether that be through dreams, whether that be through heightened intuition. And if you're serious about it, they're going to know. Okay. When you're ready, they're going to know. Okay. So one of the things that you can do is you can create an altar. Okay. And I have a picture. I'm actually going to drop that down. Actually, I'm going to put that up on my Instagram. I'm going to make y'all come over there to Instagram and see that altar. It's very simple because the place that I'm in right now, I'm in a temporary space right now while I'm waiting on my permanent space to be ready. So it's very simple, and I had to work with what I had. That's why I was like, you know what, let me take a picture of this, because a lot of times you see stuff online on social media and it's all tricked out, and you look at it, you're like, I could never, I can't do anything like that. This is really simple. This is really basic. This is something that anybody can do. You can also do a shrine, which is going to be outside. It could be down on the floor. Mine is a table, white cloth, fruit, I've got a plant on there. They love black coffee. Always keep a glass of water on there, and I have a holder for incense. Okay. And then I also have a scroll that has all their names on there as well as some money. Okay, so it's very simple. Be sure to check out my Instagram at Holistic and Spiritual AF Podcast. I had to do the whole thing for Instagram. They was tripping in order to see that picture to get an idea of that. Okay, or I may put it up on YouTube. So we'll just see about that. But it can be very simple, and this is going to dedicate some time for you to be able to ask questions and ask them, you know, and try to get in contact with them and get some names and see how that correlates with the information that you do. So once you set up this dedicated space, something that I like to do regularly is to do intuitive journaling. So I'll ask a question. If it's something that I want to know about what's going on in my life, I'll ask a question. And then I'll meditate for a while in front of that altar. Now, I've done some things before that, but I'm not going to talk about that on this particular episode. So I'll have done some things before I start asking for shit, okay? Because it's just like anywhere else. Don't go running around asking for stuff and you're not offering anything, okay? Because this is energy exchange, okay? So I'll have done some offerings and some candle burnings, incense, you know, different types of things. And then I'll have my journal. I'll sit in front of there. I'll meditate on that question that I asked them. And then I start to write. So for those of you who maybe cannot hear right away exactly what it is that they're saying or the messages, writing is another gateway to the spirit realm that is very powerful. It's also a gateway to the subconscious as well. So I've been doing that type of work and the work in hoodoo and roots for about almost a year now, like every day consistently. And there's so much growth behind that. And this all started with connecting with my ancestors because I found out what's in my DNA. I found out the different pantheons that my family rocks with. Now, I just explained to you, we've got Nigerian roots, I've got Benin roots, I've got Congo roots, I've got roots from Louisiana. I think we all kind of know like what kind of roots go down over there, as well as California, that Aztec and right there by that Mexico area. Also a lot of indigenous Native American energy and ancestry as well. So I've got it honest, a lot of shamans in my bloodline, a lot of healers in my bloodline. So a lot of intuits, a lot of the things that I gravitated towards and that I actually practice in my life today. So that's the importance of connecting with your own ancestors, because it's going to allow you to do what you're supposed to be doing. It's very specific to you and your bloodline and your lineage, how you're going to be able to venerate them, how you're going to be able to dress your altar, how you're going to be able to receive information, the type of divination tools that you'll use, if you'll even be using those types of things, okay? So once we start seeing stuff online that's very commercialized, oils and different kind of spells and rituals you can be doing, nothing replaces connecting with your own ancestors, because once you start tapping into what somebody else is doing, that may be specific for their bloodline. And that also is the lazy and easy way out. Okay. Do what it takes to connect with your ancestors. I promise you it's going to be worth it. My spiritual journey has been nothing short of amazing. I got to check my time, guys. Nothing short of amazing, and I'm so grateful for it. Okay, so those were the two ways that I wanted to show you, tell you about. A, asking your family members about your ancestry. Two is actually, I guess, B is going to also be creating an altar, a very simple altar. I'll have a picture of that up on the Instagram profile, and I also added into the video at the end of the video on YouTube. Also, another way is visiting grave sites. Okay, so if you have access to a family cemetery, or you're still in the city or the state where some of your family was buried, that's a great way to go and connect. So yeah, nothing replaces actually tapping into your own ancestry and connecting with them. And that's going to give you so many answers, so much clarity. It's going to allow you to start to create a working relationship with them, where they're there to assist you and guide you on your journey in this life, because they want to help us. Okay, we have more access to our ancestry than they did, and because we've been uprooted and pulled away from it, it's been less accessible. Actually, it's more accessible for us now, but it's more forgotten for us. Okay. So hopefully you guys got some value out of that. There's so much more I could talk about with this one, but like I said, I want to have other people and experts as well share their perspective. So I'll probably have a part 2 as well as a part 3 to this, but I definitely wanted to tell you guys a little bit about my journey. And I still left like a huge chunk of it out because it just would have been too long doing this thing by myself. Okay. So just know that connecting with your ancestors is extremely powerful, particularly people of the African diaspora in America. This is how we heal generational trauma. This is how we break generational curses. Once we do those things, then we can tap into creating generational wealth and therefore instilling this in the generation that comes forward. That's our children, that's our grandchildren, that's our great grandchildren. This is how we heal, guys. This is how we become free. Okay, so this is what you got to understand. You got to do the work and you got to tap into your own ancestry. All right, guys, that's it. Until the next episode. Peace.